how to make an indie pop song like Lany, Lauv, Conan Gray, this style of artist that has a really upbeat type of energy, indie pop style song. I do have one right here that we're going to go through right now, how he made it from a production perspective, but also a little bit from the processing side of things, so you guys can recreate the same type of thing if you're looking to. The bulk of this song really comes down to this synth bass here. So let me go through how I created this bass sound. I'm going to double click and just show you the MIDI notes. So as you can see, there's only 3 MIDI notes here, and this is on a loop. So where the action is coming from is from the MIDI effects arpeggiator. So I'll play that for you and you can see it run through this pattern. So if I take off the arp, all we have is this bass sound. So if you want to recreate this type of thing, find the sound that you want. So just like the one note kind of thing, and then you can throw an arpeggiator on it. Sometimes the synth you're working with that you go and find this sound has a built-in arpeggiator. Or if it doesn't, you can use under the MIDI effects here. You can use some of these effects, but the arpeggiator is something you can use. For myself, I use the Trillion bass. And actually Trillion does have a built-in arpeggiator. I just decided to use the Logic one for some reason, actually no reason at all. And then I've just done a low cut just to get rid of those sub frequencies. I did a small multiband compression on a bit of the high end of the bass, and then I did another multiband compression to sidechain the kick. And this is something that gives it also this type of rhythm. So I'll get into that in a second. So just by adding this arpeggiator from scratch, it's default by a 1/16 note. So it's going to be pretty fast like this. Already sounds cool, but we need that to groove a bit more. Every note is at the same velocity and it's just being played 16 times a bar. So you have to go to grid, and then usually you can make patterns. 8 notes and 16th notes is a good pattern to stick to, and then by clicking these up and down, you can change the velocity of things. So just by going like this, you'll notice a big change already. Now, to get that swing type feel, you have to get rid of the 5th note, and that will give it a feeling like this. If you're new here, please feel free to subscribe. I'm Charles Klein, singer-songwriter and producer. You can test different things. If you want to get rid of the 3rd note instead, that's fine too. Test different things if you want to get rid of the 4th note, but that 5th note will give this type of feeling that I was most interested in. You can go down to the custom thing here, and there's actually presets by just going left and right. There's preset arpeggiators that might sound cool for a vibe just to get you started with a song like this one. That's cool, but what about this one? And these shorter notes here are actually just like played shorter. So if we go back to our custom grid here, we can actually click these and bring them in by just clicking and dragging. So those are going to sound a bit shorter, number 2 and 3. So that's also cool to dial in on a custom sound that you'd like. So what are some other things that I added to this bass sound to make it more in your face? The sidechain was a big one, and then I just added some reverb, a short reverb, a hollow reverb, just to put it in a bit of a space. And then that's always a good thing to do, I find. And then side chaining, which is super important. So I do it with the FabFilter Pro M. It's a multi-band compression. You can do this with any standard compressor as well. I use this Pro MB multi-band because I can just narrow in on a certain frequency that I want ducked, instead of sometimes a compressor. Actually, not sometimes. When you use a compressor to sidechain something, it will compress the entire signal. So I only want to, when the kick happens, I only want this frequency to duck. Somewhere in the compressor, you will find like sidechain, and it will be, you have to go find your instrument. So for me, it's under instrument, and I've named it kick. So I choose kick. Then you have to go down here to this little pop-out window if you're using FabFilter, and go to external. Then they're connected. So if I just play my kick with it, you'll see every time the kick plays, this ducks. You want a fast attack, You can do a release time at what you prefer, and then the lower the threshold you get, the more of a pumping effect you're going to get. So that's too much. I like it about here. Now we take this synth bass sound and build the song around it. So on the drums we have kick and snare pattern, 4 to the floor kick with snares on the 2 and 4. Sounds like this. I'm layering 2 types of snares, so I have 1 kick, 2 types of snares, so this snare. It's a bit more fatter, a bit more boxy. This snare is a bit more high end. I just like that feeling. You can of course use 1 snare, you can layer multiple snares. You'll notice the structure at the top, intro, verse, verse, pre-chorus, verse, pre-chorus, bridge, chorus. Standard pop structure. We have the intro verse into the verse. We need some type of transition there. The verse to the pre, we need some type of transition here. Verse to chorus, chorus to verse, verse to pre. All these tabs, you really should think about something that transitions the listener into each of those sections. For example, we have the intro here, which is a transition that sucks you into the verse. So how I built that was all of the instruments that were in the song, not all of them, but certain parts. Like I took the synth bass here, reversed it, and took other 2 synths that we'll get into, and I reversed those as well. So I picked the chord, the second chord. If you pick the first chord and reverse that, it won't sound as good because you're reversing a tone that you're going into. So pick a different type of tone in the key. Maybe it's the second chord, then reverse that. And now it's going to sound better. If you're not familiar how to do reverse reverbs and reverse sweeps, I do have another video of that on my page. So that's your transition piece right into the verse intro. And we have this little sample here, which is just the glue between this intro piece and the verse. Because without that, it sounds okay, but there's no... Maybe you want that effect, but I find it sometimes nice to have a bit of glue between those. And that's just a down here, snare hit. So great little transition hack, and now we're adding the guitars. So let's dig into the guitars for a second. This is just 1 guitar. It's an electric guitar that I played right into the interface, so coming in dry. And then I added a Logic amp, a Native Instruments guitar rig setup. You can add certain elements, more amps on it. So actually I'm running through 2 different amps, and that's just the right tone that I liked. Maybe that's wrong, I don't care. But I'm running it through 2 different amps. Then I have a Fab Filter EQ, just taking out some of the low end, and I'm not using any of these effects. I tried adding delay, compressing it more, also added distortion, and then I had the pedal board going, but turns out I didn't really like any of those, but might keep them for later as I'm still producing and mixing the song. Maybe I'll pop one of them on, and maybe I'll change my mind. Where I think the guitar is really getting its magic from is this bus 17 chorus effect and a micro shift effect, and that's making the guitar just sound really wide, because I wasn't sure where to place the guitar, on the left or the right, and I didn't really want it in the center, so I just decided to like completely make it wide, so it's kind of behind your ears and behind the synth bass. Transition piece. Wanted this to be more dreamy, the pre-chorus to be more dreamy. I didn't really want the synth bass just to be looped for the entire song, because that can get super annoying. Now I guess where the magic is coming from this section is the synth bus down here. I have the pads are making a big difference. These 2 pads, synth pads, they're just playing the first chord and the third chord, wow, it's snowing outside and it's in April. And then an E piano is even a bit higher here. On top of that, I have an electric guitar just doing the chords out, ringing out. We have percussion that continues the rhythm, but we're also adding these synths and an arp down here. And the synth and arp are on automated like rising effects that lead into the chorus nicely. You can hear it now. Okay, as for the drums, let's take a look at the drums. No kick, no snare, just actually a ton of shakers. And this little cool loop down here, it's kind of like a woody loop thingy. So this is just a sample that I stretched, and it kind of has that distorted feel to it because I stretched it so much, but I like that because it sounds super lo-fi in a way. These are also automated down high cuts. So I'm taking all the high end away from this and rising it up to the chorus. If you're going to take such a rhythmic element of the song, this synth bass, if you're going to cut that out completely, then I think you need to replace it with something that will carry the rhythm. I find you do need to tell the listener, okay, the synth bass is gone, but we still have rhythm here. It's such a small element, but keeps the entire song together. Now, what makes the chorus so big again is because we're adding the main element, the synth bass. Nothing really changes. The drums are the same. We're adding a crash, so it's a bit more of a thing there. We have the synth melody, the guitars are back in, all the synths are back in, and we're adding a new synth. And then this new synth down here. Bell type synth that sits more on the top end to just fill out more of the soundscape. The second part of the chorus, we have a big tom roll and then more shakers that I think definitely add a lot. The second verse still has the rhythm, but is like underwater in a way. So that's exactly what I did with the drums and the synth bass, is I just took all the high end and a bit of the low end, kind of shaped it around, well, I'll show you exactly, around this area. Shaped it for that entire verse and then popped it out again at the pre-chorus. Or sorry, the middle of the verse here. So drums and the synth bass are really underwater. On this part of the chorus, I did add 2 new guitars. These ones here. One guitar is following a very similar melody to these synths. I'm also spreading that and making it really wide, so it sounds like this. I didn't pan this, but what I did instead was I'm using the Soundtoys Pan Man, and that's going to, well, you can tell it where you want the signal to be and how fast you want it to go left and then go right. So it's kind of knocking back and forth. I think toms are super important for transition pieces in this kind of indie pop 80s sound. So what I did here was I went displace, found this 80s style tom sound, and then just made this roll. So how we did this, or how I did this, was I just took the synth in the song that had the most presence. So it was this synth. And then at the ends of these, I just snipped it a bit so it had hard cuts. So it's kind of more like a sample of a synth, almost like you're sampling your own synth. If you're new here, please feel free to subscribe because I do videos like this, but I also go live on Mondays and Fridays taking music production, music marketing, and Logic production questions. So feel free to join one of those, and I hope to see you in the next one.